Again, a sort of few words and thoughts that may or not be of use before we move into some of the final group time. In those who lead retreats, there's always a discussion about, it's easy enough in a retreat experience in times of silence away from home and work, food laid on and prayer, and possibly spiritual direction. It's always fairly easy to create quite deep and intense felt experiences of God, those kind of peak experiences, the peaking experience at particular points. But then there's always the question of, you kind of leave the place of retreat, the place of beauty, the place of silence, and you go back to life, and then pretty much usually it's life as usual. And the question is, how do we integrate the peak experience of and the encounter with God that we may experience in a special way at those times, and how to enable them to feed into a life of ongoing, what we might call formational, transformational, discipleship, or whatever. Jerry Hughes, you will know his writings, he said once, all too often on retreat it's a matter of glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, and then 3 days after getting home it's as it was in the beginning. How do we bridge, therefore, is a question for us. Ignatius, with his spiritual exercises, when he originally devised them, was aiming to give them to people of authority, people of power, and he was criticised in a sense for having, if you like, an option for the rich rather than an option for the poor. But his aim was that if he could address the lives of people of influence around Europe in the 16th century, if he could touch their lives deeply with the person of Jesus Christ, they would go back home, and by their decision-making and their influence, they would change the lives of many, many people. His aim, if you like, was a transformation of society by doing it through certain points. Could we argue that that was a failed experiment? Reminds me of the book that James Hillman wrote some years ago, We've Had 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Getting Worse. So how do we capture, how do we integrate these times of being touched of grace, and how do we integrate them into everyday life? The other question I think that comes up for me as I reflect as we come to a conclusion is a question of community. In a sense, you are a professional community, a community of professionals with very similar jobs, but you are scattered. You live, in a sense, in other contexts around the country. So we have a relationship with one another as we do with God, and as we do with those among whom we work and live on a day-to-day basis. When Sarah was talking about reconciliation, she said one of the things of reconciliation is sitting and eating at the table together. And of course we have done that in many different ways in the few days we spent together. But church communities, it also seems to me, are constantly communities in flux. Sunday by Sunday, parish communities come together, they are gathered together, they spend time together, and then they disperse into their everyday lives before coming together again, before dispersing again. And one of the questions that often laity asks is or questions that clergy ask of the laity as well, how does the faith expressed in joy and worship on Sunday, how does that lead into and affect everyday lives? So it's a question. But this sense of gathering together and dispersing happens, it seems to me, particularly in the church, on many different levels. So we have come together and we have formed one kind of group, one kind of community, and we're going to be leaving, still if you like, in companionship, but as members of a different kind of community and members of other communities. And what roots and grounds us as an individual, as a community, as a corporate, if you like, must be the relationship with God, and hopefully that ongoing and deepening friendship and intimacy with Jesus we've talked about. I've got two quotations I'd like to kind of offer and then conclude with. One is from a writer called John Climacus, and he wrote a book called The Ladder of Divine Perfection. He comes from the Orthodox tradition. And it's a quotation I often use when talking about discernment. I think it applies to other areas of the Christian in life. And he says, what God is interested in is not so much the right outcome of a matter, but rather the suppleness with which we let ourselves fall into his hands. So often on the Christian journey, people can get really hung up on making the right decision, finding the right path, doing the right thing, following the right way, perhaps in a belief that if they get it right, it will be blessed and work out okay. What John Climacus is saying importantly, I think, is it's the process, if you like, of letting ourselves fall into God's hands that is actually more important than any particular outcome. And he uses the word suppleness, and I think, we began our time together and I led a meditation and we talked about the body, and we can all be very aware of the suppleness or otherwise of our bodies or different parts of it. And it's working with the suppleness of the spirit, it seems to me, that's something of daily prayer is about. It's not so much the right outcome of the matter, but the suppleness of our willingness of which we may let ourselves fall into God's hands. The other quote I wanted to reflect on was one that was sent me when I was ordained, and it's from W.H. Auden. And it's because of his visitation, his capital H, Christ's visitation, we may no longer desire God as if he were lacking. Our journey is not a question of pursuit, but of surrender to him who is always and everywhere present. So we pray that, following him, we may depart from our anxiety into his peace. I'll repeat that again in a minute. But it seems to me what we're saying here is often we can think of our vocation as Christians, as clergy, as whatever role we happen to be occupying, as something that is to be achieved, or once it's been graced us with, there is achievements that are part of it, that are necessary and that can drive us. But I think what he's saying also is that vocation has already been given. God's love and grace have been given. And our invitation is to relax into it rather than strive to fulfill it. It is to accept what has already been given, to relax into it, rather than to work actively with it. Because of his visitation, we may no longer desire God as if he were lacking. Our journey is not a question of pursuit, but of surrender to him who is always and everywhere present. So we pray that, following him, we may depart from our anxiety into his peace. To allow a moment or two silence, I'm going to introduce a question for brief reflection, allow a moment or two silence, and introducing the second question. Question for a brief moment of reflection. In the journey of the last few days, how are you feeling now? In the journey of the last few days, how are you feeling now? Let's take what it comes. journey of the last few days mean for you in your role when you return? What will the journey of the last few days here together mean for you in your role and your life and choice when you return? What it will mean for you when you return? A minute more and then we'll be moving on. So we're going to be moving into our groups for the last time. For the leaders, there are more candles and matches here for those who want. And we've got in those groups from about 25 past to 12 o'clock, and then we meet in the lower church for the Eucharist at 12:15. In a rather postmodern way, I'm going to let the groups decide how you want to balance silence and sharing, so just a quick